Some struggles aren't just won in a single battle or a single lifetime. They're more like a relay race where the baton of freedom gets passed from one generation to the next. The fight for women's rights in India is exactly that. It's this incredible, nearly 200-year story of peeling back layer after layer of oppression. And with each generation, the very definition of what it means to be free gets a little bigger, a little more complete. So today, we're going to explore how this unfinished manifesto has been written, chapter by chapter. This quote from Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, one of the main architects of the Indian Constitution, just cuts right to the heart of our story. He's essentially saying, look, you can't build a shiny modern nation on a rotten foundation of social inequality. It's a powerful image, isn't it? Building a palace on a dung heap. This was the central tension, the fight for real, deep social reform versus just, papering over the cracks with economic laws. So, to really get a grip on this long journey, we're going to zoom in on three pivotal moments. We'll start back in the 19th century with the fight to ban a truly horrific custom. Then, we'll jump to the mid-20th century, to a battle to literally rewrite the laws of the land. And finally, we'll look at the modern struggle to give a voice to those who have been silenced for way, way too long. All right, so our story begins way back in 1829 with the first major battle in this long war, the movement to abolish the brutal practice of sati. But as we're about to see, even this very first step forward was really complicated by a debate that, it completely missed the point. So what exactly was sati? Well, it was a custom where a widow would burn to death on her husband's funeral pyre. Now, while it was sometimes framed as this voluntary, noble act of ultimate devotion, let's be real, it was often deeply coercive, a horrifying end for women who had just lost their husbands. And here's where the fundamental disconnect was. On one side, you had the British Anglicists arguing for abolition because it was progressive. On the other side, you had the Orientalists who were worried that interfering with local customs would cause a huge backlash. But notice the one thing they both had in common. They were arguing about what was authentic to Hindu scripture. The entire debate was about religious tests, completely ignoring the actual human suffering of the women involved. And this wasn't just a British thing. Even Indian reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy fought fire with fire. He went deep into the same scriptures to argue that sati wasn't actually required, and that a quiet, ascetic life was a better path for a widow. Of course, the conservatives just pulled out their own set of texts, arguing sati was a fast track to heaven. It became this battle of the books, and the women at the center of it all, they were completely voiceless. Okay, let's fast forward over a century. The fight evolves. It's no longer about a single custom. Now it's a full-blown assault on the entire legal system that kept women down. And this battle was led by the absolute powerhouse, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. This was Ambedkar's radical insight. He looked at practices like sati and saw that they were just symptoms of a much, much deeper disease. The real problem wasn't just one tradition. It was the entire framework of personal law that treated women as second-class citizens. The law itself was the cage. So his solution was the Hindu Code Bill. And this thing was designed to smash that cage to pieces. Just look at these provisions. They were completely revolutionary. Daughters get to inherit property equally with sons. Divorce is legalized for women. Polygamy is out. Caste is no longer a barrier to marriage, and women get absolute full control over their own property. This was nothing short of a legal earthquake. To really get just how radical this was, you have to look at this table. Under the main legal tradition, Matakshara, property only passed through the male line. Sons, grandsons. Women were just completely shut out. Even under the slightly more liberal Dayabhaga law, a woman only got a life estate, meaning she could use the property but she could never ever sell it. Ambedkar's bill said, nope, we're wiping all that away. Daughters get an equal share and women get full control. Game-changing. And this quote just captures his vision perfectly. For Ambedkar, this wasn't just another bill. It was a foundational document for a truly free and modern India. A charter of women's rights that would finally give real meaning to the promises of the new constitution. But as you can imagine, you don't propose an earthquake without causing a huge reaction. The bill was met with an absolute firestorm of protest. Conservatives claimed it was a direct assault on the sacred nature of Hindu society, and it kicked off a bitter, multi-year political war. And in the end, the opposition was just too strong. The bill stalled for years. Prime Minister Nehru tried to compromise by splitting it into 4 separate laws, but even that failed. So, in a final, powerful act of protest against the government backing down, Dr. Ambedkar resigned from his position as India's very first law minister. The charter, for the time being, remained unfulfilled. But hold on, the story doesn't end there. Because even if the Hindu Code bill had passed exactly as written, there was another, even deeper layer of oppression that it couldn't fully fix. A struggle that was really only just beginning to find its voice. This brings us to a really critical concept called triple marginalization. It's the core idea of Dalit feminism. It says that for Dalit women, those at the very bottom of the caste hierarchy, oppression isn't just one thing. It's the crushing weight of 3 forces all hitting them at once: the prejudice of their caste, the hardship of their class, and the discrimination of their gender. And this is exactly why a new approach was needed. You see, mainstream feminism at the time often focused primarily on gender, which meant it couldn't fully grasp this complex reality. It was, in a way, a single-layered analysis for a multi-layered problem. Dalit women were fighting a battle on 3 fronts, and they needed a voice that truly understood that. That voice began to emerge through literature. Kausalya Basantri's autobiography, The Double Curse, was a bombshell. It laid bare the painful truth that Dalit women faced oppression not just from the outside world of upper castes, but also from the patriarchal attitudes within their own families and communities. And this quote shows the incredible evolution of that voice. In the hands of powerful modern writers like Meena Kandasamy, these stories of suffering are no longer just accounts of being a victim. No, they are transformed into acts of defiance. They become a proclamation of resistance, where the very act of writing your story is a form of activism. So, after this nearly 200-year journey, where does that leave us? Well, it takes us from a place where women were the silent subjects of a debate to a place where they are the authors of their own story. When you lay it all out like this, you see this amazing progression, right? The fight started as a debate over ancient scriptures. Then it evolved into a massive battle over modern law. And today, it's become a powerful protest expressed through personal and often political literature. So here's the most important thing to take away from all this. The 19th century abolitionists, the legal reformers like Ambedkar, and today's Dalit writers. They are all part of the exact same story. Each generation has peeled back another layer of the onion, from custom to law to social exclusion, and in doing so, they've pushed for a deeper, more inclusive, and more complete definition of what freedom truly means. And that's the thing. This manifesto is still being written. The struggle keeps evolving, finding new battlegrounds and new ways to make its voice heard. Which leaves all of us with one final question to think about. What's the next chapter in this fight gonna look like?